Welcome back to another episode of the Trees and Lines podcast. This time, Robert Brewer, President and CEO of PUC Services Incorporated, an electric and water utility in Ontario, joins us to talk about the ways the company is leading in innovation. Have a listen. Hope you enjoy. Welcome, Rob. Appreciate you taking time to join us on the Pods and Lines podcast, or Trees and Lines podcast. You can fix
Nice.
that.
It's been a minute. We're rusty.
He's just trying to make me feel comfortable when I do it.
That's all that was, Rob. Pre-planned. Yeah. Well, welcome, Rob. I do appreciate your taking time to participate on the Trees and Lines podcast. We were talking not long ago, and I think you have a story that I found quite interesting, your personal career path, and just looking forward to meeting you, meeting your company, and talking to you a little bit about your ideas.
Well, thanks for the invite to be on the show, Phil. I'm very encouraged by the role that you guys have been able to do in elevating utility tree work. I think it's exciting stuff.
Yeah, good. Well, why don't you start us off by telling us a little bit about your story, your career path, and the company you're working with now?
Sure. Well, thank you. Yeah. So started out, in the utility business. My first role was really in utility forestry. So came up, I'm a university grad. I've got an MBA and all these sort of things, but I also have a background as a tradesperson in utility forestry. So I have up in Canada here, we have a full trades program. And so utility arborist is the trade that works within proximity to hydro lines here in terms of being qualified. And so I had a company that I had started that did utility arborist work. Worked across Canada primarily, and worked with some really great utilities, and really learned a lot of really important things that I think has carried me forward in my career. Utility forestry or the utility arborist work is one of the most hazardous things that we do as utilities. And so as now working at a utility, and one of the biggest focus for us is how do we keep everybody safe every day? How do we manage those risks? And having qualified tradespeople doing the work and qualified equipment with good companies and good leadership is critical to the success for us. And so there's been a huge renewed focus really on doing tree work around lines. And so the career path I had was sort of a nice fit, and that started out from that perspective, understood what utilities do, understood safety, understood risk within a utility environment. And then, I had built that business, and I had sold it a number of years back to a firm out of the U.S. Agreed to work for a few years to transition it, and after those years were up, I got a headhunter call, and next thing I knew, the local utility was looking for a person to head up the utility. And so wasn't my first thought was that this is what I want to do, because I think when we all come up from an entrepreneurial perspective, I think utilities don't really necessarily look at us and flash, this is an entrepreneurial world. But I think what I found is that the transition that's going on right now within utilities actually needs an entrepreneurial look on it, or a lens on it. And so we've been able to do some really neat things here. And so we've grown our business here significantly. We've done a lot of really neat things, but one of the other real things is we focused on safety, and one of the big primary things that we focused on is how do we ensure that the folks that are out there doing the work on our lines from a tree perspective are safe and are the most competent and qualified people we can find. And so pretty good story around that.
Yeah, very good. So those workers, if I recall, you have a rather unique situation with your contractor, and that they're not entirely independent. Is that correct?
No, they're not. Yeah, exactly. So we found ourselves in a really unique spot here. So a lot of the municipal utilities, I work for a municipally owned utility, and a lot of municipally owned utilities are relatively small compared to like the Goliath in the province, which is Hydro One. And so Hydro One has their own forces that primarily do their tree trimming. And so there's not really a draw, or there wasn't a draw in the contractor pool from them. And so the contractor pool in the province really satisfied the municipally owned utilities. And there's a lot of them. There's about 60 of them. But if you look at the amount of work that's ongoing, Hydro One has a lot of rural work. Hydro One has significant tree coverage. So what happened a number of years back, and this goes back, I guess, about 6-7 years, is Hydro One was trying to play catch up, and so they started to contract. And what happened is it just dried up the contractor pool, and so suddenly people were getting into utility forestry that weren't competent qualified, that you were trying to fill a need that just didn't make sense from a risk perspective. So a number of other utilities were encountering some challenges, and we still had a contractor in place for another year, so we were okay. But a number of other ones couldn't even get qualified contractors, and so it actually started at a industry event. We were down at a conference, and there was some questions around, what do we do here? And so because of the background that I had, people came to me and said, how do we try to solve this problem? And the first thing we decided was, or coming out of that conference was, we need to do a better job of making sure that we've got competent and qualified people to do our work, because we don't want to see accidents and incidents happening in our business. And so we ended up starting our own business. So the three northern utilities closest to us, so Sudbury, North Bay, and PUC, which is Sault Ste. Marie, within about 6 months, we'd stood up our own contractor. We have our own crews. We have competent and qualified leadership that we were able to bring in. We have, we pay them well. They stay year round. We don't have any seasonality. We don't have layoffs. We treat them well. They have great benefits. They get paid well. And the end result is we don't have a lot of turnover in that group. So we know that we've got competent and qualified people with good leadership. We know that they have solid equipment, and they have year-round work programs. And so what we're able to do is to really solve a lot of the challenges that we were seeing. Number one, availability. We created our own supply. Number two was one of the struggles, especially in the northern climate here, was that seasonality was a concern. And so we were able to address that, don't have layoffs. And the end result was we got a happy workforce that's been doing a great job. So, I think we just finished our 5th year in business. We've been very fortunate to have had a absolutely phenomenal safety record for that 5 years. And we've also found that when people are back year after year, then there's a sense of ownership of the work. And so not only are they competent, qualified, doing the work safely, but their customers, or our customers, become their customers, right? They're the same people that they see time and time again. And so our number of customer complaints, I think we're down around 5% of what we used to get. Like, it's just absolutely a phenomenal story. So great customer delivery. It's been cost effective. They know the areas. They're efficient at it, and a phenomenal safety record. So the things that we set out to do hit every button.
You said you guys stood up this organization, you and the other two utilities. Mm-hmm. So that's a private arm. That's a private entity.
Yeah.
And was it resourced with Canadian resources, or did you pull from U.S. folks?
No, these are all Canadian resources. It's 3 Canadian utilities, so the people needed to be able to work here, and there's some subtleties that are different between the two markets, like the stability testing for bucket trucks is a slightly different ratio, and there's certain things like that.
Got it.
So it really needed to be stood up with a Canadian lens to it.
Got it.
But there's no reason why it couldn't be done elsewhere. I mean, it really was we looked at it, and how do we do better by our customers in terms of making sure we're cost effective and we're delivering really a culture of customer excellence, and how do we do it in a way that really raises the bar on safety? And we were able to do all 3, so it was phenomenal.
So first of all, that's very entrepreneurial of you. So clearly you were able to participate, even though you're in a utility structure, to be creative and come up with something that sits outside the utility. So it has its own ownership. Like you guys there's no stake that you have in it, right? Did you find people, or was there already an existing company and you just kind of built infrastructure on it?
No, we stood up the company, and we put the capital in, and we just stood it up as a standalone. We each own a third, so nobody has control. It's run by a board of directors, and some of us are on the board. We stood up leadership for the company, so it's extremely well funded.
Wow.
If it needs capital, we've got a lot of capital we can put into. We haven't really seen a need. It's been running in an effective way. And so, it was done with the intent that there wasn't a dominant player, where all 3 were even partners in it at the end of the day.
Wow.
And it's hitting all the buttons that we were hoping it would.
Given that you're a municipality, or the 3 utilities, I'm assuming, are all municipalities, right?
Yeah. They're all municipally owned. They're all private companies.
Okay.
The ultimate shareholder through holdcos, et cetera, is a municipality. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And was that a challenge, like from a regulatory perspective, or was there any kind of major hurdles that you had to work through to get something like that started? Because it's a very creative idea. I
Yeah.
haven't heard of this, frankly.
I haven't seen another one. I mean,
No.
think about it. Like the struggle you have is if you stand up your own internal department, then suddenly people are coming in as a utility arborist, and then they're bumping over because they can make $1 or $2 more an hour as a lineman, and now you've got this flow out of where you're trying to keep qualified and competent
Yeah.
people, right? So there's a struggle with like if you build it just internally, then you create some of these challenges, right? If you as part of an internal, if you create it as a standalone, well funded, well led, then you've got this captive work that your utilities have. So now you can get this, you can build it to facilitate that 12-month a year work, and so stable employment for the guys and all the rest of it. And so it is unique. Now, some of the regulatory challenges, I mean, we structured it in a way because we were doing the work for ourselves. We did it on a cost plus. So if the regulator wants to poke into it, we're happy to share, and we have like through our cost of services, which is our rate filings. I mean, we can defend that the rates that we're seeing in terms of the work being done here is at or below what it is in the market.
Right.
So that means our customers are benefiting. It's more efficient, right? Our customers are benefiting because we've got skilled and competent people out there doing the work every day, right? And there's not a lot of turnover of them, so we know what they are, and they have that sense of ownership of the systems that we operate, right? So
Yep.
no, I think we from a regulatory perspective, it's been through a number of different rate filings. Every 5 years we all go, so all three of us have been through at least once, and
Yep.
they have looked at it in a positive way every time we've seen it. So
Rob, just rewinding a little bit.
yeah.
Kind of interested in the business that you built and sold, and a little bit of that story. So just for clarity, what you built, was it a line clearance company?
Yeah, so we were in line clearing. We were in significant railway contractors, so herbicide and some tree work on railways.
Okay.
DOT, municipalities.
Yep.
We had a GIS arm. We did some
Wow.
photo interp work, which we've been accelerating here with a trial that we've been doing. But there's a number of things that we were involved in, but certainly we were utility arborist company as well.
How big did you get in terms of bodies, scale?
We would have been in about 2/3 of the U.S. with respect to geography with the railroad company once we'd merged, or once we had sold a chunk of it into the U.S., that U.S. entity we merged with or
Yep.
sold to. And then all across Canada with respect to the utility arborist world. And so pretty good geographical presence, a few hundred employees, peaked up. We had the seasonality challenge, so we would go well above that and well below that, but that was it was scaled pretty good. Certainly, not on the size of say like an Asplund or somebody you see in the U.S. where you've got, thousands and thousands of employees, but no, it was something that we looked at as was a good business, and certainly facilitated a lot of neat conversations around how to grow, because it was certainly growing quite quickly.
Was the motivation to sell simply monetary, or did you just hit a hurdle and it was a decision where to make the next jump, it would have been capital intensive, or you were running into other challenges? Like, what prompted you to then go look for a buyer, or did the buyer come find you?
They sought us, I guess. At the end of the day, it was, but it was something we were interested in, and it was more because of we needed to transition out of just the Canadian market and into the North American market, and so we could do that somewhat organically, and I would probably spend 2 decades trying to do it, or else we could do it in a quicker way and make it happen quicker. So that was the initial sort of impetus towards where it was attractive. Was we wanted to grow, and we had some really fantastic IP with respect to railroad that we thought would be really good in the U.S. market, and so that move gave us the insight into those markets a little bit, and some of the regulatory experience in those markets, and so gave us a ability to do it quicker than we would have been able to before because of that expertise and that scaling. from a financing
Are
perspective.
you able to share who the buyer was? I'm guessing that's public now.
Yeah, it was public. Yeah, Lewis Tree was the company that we'd sold into.
Are you in Sault Ste. Marie now?
Mm-hmm.
Was all of this done in Northern Ontario? Like, is that where you've always resided? Because I know that we share an alma mater. We went to McMaster. I did as
Yeah.
well.
Okay. Yeah.
So is that where you've been, kind of in Northern Ontario?
I came here after university. So prior to university, I lived grew up in the GTA in a town called Oakville.
Yeah.
And then high school, I was in Kingston.
Okay.
And then McMaster, sort of my initial undergrad. So it was, yeah, I sort of came from there and then came up in the summers, worked in forestry in the summertime during university, and then typical sort of story, you get up, you love it, and then you start to build a life, meet a girl, and boom, now suddenly you're up here for a long time.
Right. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
You tend to be innovative. I think what you're doing in terms of veg management, you've taken sort of innovative approaches there as well, right? Everybody else, or not everybody, but the majority still seeking the traditional cycle-based strategy.
Yeah.
But I think you're moving away from that. Is that correct?
Yeah, as fast as we can get there. So the well, one of the inefficiencies in managing vegetation comes down to balancing sort of your logistics to your need, right? And so it's simpler for us to take a map and divide it up into 4 or 3 or whatever your cycle is, 7, and say we're going to do 1/7 every year. Have at it, right? And we put that out and we put it on a tender form and send it out, and contractors come and they have to patrol all these areas, and the end result is there's a lot of time spent trying to figure out, okay, what's the appropriate cost for this? Our people do it, their people do it. There's comparisons done afterwards, and then we end up having, we do a circuit. Maybe a third of that circuit actually has to get done this year, right? The rest of it gets done because we're there, right? Because it happens to be within that box. And so one of the things that we'd initiated recently was a trial with Overstory, but it kind of lent back to some of the things we were looking at before, which was how do we use some intelligence to actually plan the work, right? Rather than just let's take a map and put some boxes on it. So we wanted to drive people or work crews out to where the actual need was and have that well identified for them. And the thought here is that if we can identify where we have encroachments using aerial photography through, initially it was photo interpreters, now it's being done with artificial intelligence. And if we can determine what species they are, then we have the ability to create a growth model. We know what the soil type is, we know what the precipitation is, we know all the parameters that are going to go into affecting how quickly trees are going to grow. As soon as we know where they are relative to our lines, so how close they are, and we know what species they are, then we know what our future work looks like. And so then we can start to plan around, okay, this section needs to be done, this section needs to be done a year from now, or 3 years from now, or 2 years from now, or whatever it is. And we can actually have crews going to where the need is, rather than just trying to do it because it's logistically simple. And we can take some of the inefficiencies out of the work. And so we're working hard at getting to that point. We've been doing a trial with Overstory to try to see how well artificial intelligence can do what photo interpreters did before, which is to identify species, but to do it in a way that takes the significant amount of cost out of what it was before, which made it almost cost prohibitive. And so now it's become way easier to do, way quicker to do. You can do it on a larger scale, and you can do it for pennies on the dollar compared to what it used to cost. So we're in the midst of a pilot right now, using Overstory and using Clarion as the platform that we would issue the work through. And the intent is to really go to a system where we're going where the work's needed, not just because it's this block on a map.
What's your smallest scheduling unit then?
Yeah, so it would be spans. This span's going to get done, that span's going to get done, rather than this circuit's going to get done. So we're trying to go back to spans rather than circuits. And it will actually go to danger trees being identified in the work program as well as this year, next year, 3 years from now, whatever, in terms of removals. So it will be to the tree with respect to danger trees, and it'll be to the span with respect to where we're sending work crews.
So Rob, you mentioned Overstory, you mentioned Clarion. Talk to us a little bit. Talk to us a little bit about specifically like those particular solutions. Like, how are you utilizing them, and why those ones in particular? Like, how have they been effective for your planning and your technology push?
We've been on this real push to try to leverage our GIS system in order to create a sort of a single source of truth and have all of our data linked via a GIS system. And so both Overstory and Clarion, which is the platform we use from issuing work perspective out into forestry, but we also use it actually within the utility, are all compatible and linked through our GIS system. So we can link all of our data, customer data, tree data, where our hydrants are, where our poles are, what type of insulator is on a pole. We can link all of that through the GIS system, and we can access it in the field using products like Clarion. And so what Clarion allows us to do is to take what we get from a work planning perspective out of like an Overstory. We've got these species that need to be treated every 3 years in terms of keeping them off the lines, create a work platform for that, or work model for that, goes into Clarion as the work platform. That work then gets issued out and then gets returned completed, puts a tracking system in place. It puts things like, there's a dog in that yard that is a challenge. So when you go there, make sure you've talked to the owner and the dog's inside. Like things like that we can all capture. And so we don't have to relearn things. And having that base platform allows us to create that history and to inform our current work based on some of the challenges or experiences or even wins. Maybe we've got a great customer, right? But who we've encountered in the past. So I think one of the things that was key for us, and we've been with Clarion. I was with them with my previous role, and I'm with them now. But one of the really important things for us was to really make sure that we could archive all of that information and create a usable platform going forward. And so Clarion's been really key with that.
That's great. Rob, have you never been, enticed to maybe tackle bigger opportunities in the U.S.? Your thinking is pretty forward oriented, and it seems like you're very plugged into innovation. Like, has that ever, like, especially when you sold to a U.S. entity, did it ever sort of cross your mind to kind of physically move to the U.S. and start looking at like larger geographies and see if you could apply some of this innovative and progressive way of thinking into other markets?
Yeah. So as I look out at 1.5 meters of snow, the answer is probably should have. Yes.
Yeah. Right.
But over the last 2 weeks, I think we've gotten somewhere between 150 and 200 centimeters of snow up there.
Don't miss that.
No. So one of the advantages of Northern Ontario, one of the things I really love about Sault Ste. Marie is it is an unbelievable place to raise a family. And so we have a large family. We are, somewhat anchored here. If I go down to some southern location, I've got a 14-year-old son that's a phenomenal hockey player who's busy with hockey. And so there's certain things that you kind of, and we're close to probably not being in that situation. But
Yep.
When you start to factor some of those things in, and I think what we were looking for is, there's that balance, right? You're trying to find, how do I find something that is challenging and requires some creativity and makes you want to get up every day, but that you can also do in a place where, your family thrives and everybody's sort of happy at the end of the day. And so I think we found that. I think we very much enjoy where we live.
Yep.
Our youngest is going to be hitting high school in a year or two here. So
okay.
We're probably not far from having some flexibility, but I don't know that we change either. I mean, there's something to be said about I have a number of friends in the GTA, and the first topic of conversation is always traffic, right? So they come to me and the traffic's horrible, and so I say, yeah, you know what? I got a 12-minute commute to the office. If it's rush hour, it takes me 13. It's literally like that. I might miss a light, and so there's something to be said about that too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's it for this episode of Trees and Lines, brought to you by Iapetus Holdings. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. If you have any questions or comments on any of our episodes or ideas for topics or guests, we'd love to hear from you. Please contact us at treesandlines@iapetusllc.com. We'll chat with you soon.